My name is Jose Quintero, and before we start this week's episode, don't forget to hit that thumbs up, subscribe, and follow us on Instagram at Échale Podcast. All right, let's get to it. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Échale Podcast. My name is Jose Quintero. I'm very excited today because, as we all know, it's Memorial Day week, and talking to veterans is something that I don't get to do often, but I feel like their stories are great. They are filled with so much knowledge, so much life, but also at sometimes they don't know how to redirect that pain that sometimes may come out. So I'm very excited today to have Ralph Figueroa join us today. He grew up in Puente, half Mexicano, half Salvadoreño, U.S. Army veteran, graduated with honors from Cal Poly Pomona in 2022. Currently a graduate student at Cal State San Bernardino in the Rehabilitation Counseling M.A. program with a 4.0 GPA, works with CSUSB student veterans, spouses, and dependents at the Veteran Success Center, president of the Student Veterans Organization, stand-up comedian who got the opportunity of a lifetime to perform all around the world with our servicemen and women with the GIs of comedy. Welcome, Ralph, or Rafa. Should I call you Rafa?
You could call me Rafa, bro. I mean, I'm good. I'm easy like Sunday morning, bro. I'm like the Commodores. I say, come on, man.
I'm excited. Talk to me a little bit because right now when I was reading your bio and I was like researching and whatnot, comedy and the Army. Were you Army, Marines?
I was in the Army, U.S. Army all the way. Huh? So we say that a lot.
Okay,
I don't know.
I was like,
we all sound very confused. Huh? I don't know. Yeah.
I was like, are you Southern all of a sudden? Should I know? No, okay, but how does comedy fit into the world of Army?
So honestly, one of the first comedy shows I saw was when I was in the military. So I remember. So I joined at 17. So I was still in high school. They let me do this thing called the split option. Uh-huh. So between my junior and senior of high school, I went to basic training. So I go out to Fort Jackson, South Carolina. And this is outside of my travel experience up to that point was as a Latino, we always go to see my family, my family in Mexico. So this was the first real experience of flying a plane. I went to South Carolina and it was just, I noticed even during basic training, there's always ways to decompress, right? Uh-huh. And so that's where laughter and positive energy, even during, especially it's a high stress situation. And my drill sergeant he wasn't intending to be funny, but he was funny, because he sounded like Bernie Mac. Oh, right? Shit. So he's like, hey, get your punk head over. And I'm like, whoa. And then I wanted to laugh, so...
Did that get you in trouble?
It would. He actually made me the platoon guide, to kind of punish me. But in the end, I kind of made it work, and I graduated as the platoon guide, which is awesome. But being able to do voices and stuff, and so when I was in the military, I was in a field artillery unit. Uh-huh. So field artillery is just like we're driving around in Paladin howitzers, big old tanks, and when you're out in the field, there's nothing to do. So we kind of found ways to entertain ourselves and. Part of it was, getting on the radios. We have, landline radios, and we would have like these. One guy, his name was Tattoo. His Corporal Sierra. He was a little short vato, and he every morning he'd do the Tarzan yell, and at nighttime we always knew that was like, oh, time to go for chow. And at nighttime, he would get on the radio and he would do this great Wolfman Jack. And for some of the younger viewers, you may not know who Wolfman Jack, but look him up. He was
like me.
He's an old school, radio DJ. He talked like this. He's like, hey everybody, this is Wolfman Jack. So Tattoo had this voice, and he would be the host, and he'd get on the radio, and little by little, a lot of us would start getting on there and just asking random questions and whatnot. And that's the first time I was like, oh, this is fun. So when I got into over the later years, I remember I got deployed over there during 2004, 2005, somewhere around there. Wow. And one of the events that they brought us to was a comedy show. So they actually brought some comedians that were stateside over to, which I thought was like, wow, that's cool. Like I was like, how do these guys get here? And so they go on, they do their thing, and a lot of the guys that were in my section, in my unit, were just like, hey, Fig, like, man, you're just as funny as these guys. Yeah. And it kind of like, I was just like, yeah, I'm just funny to you guys. I always thought I was just the funny, idiot in the unit, you know what I mean? I'm just the guy that just does stupid voices or making wind noises when it's all quiet. I'm doing that. And the first sergeant's like, who's doing that? And I'm like, hey, I don't know. There must be some tumbleweeds back here. And then, so eventually, after I got out of the military, I was in for 12 years. So during that time period, I mean, there was times when I used stand-up and listening to like some of my first comedians that I would really listen to that took me out of that funk. Because sometimes you get into situations where we weren't necessarily happy to be there, but we did because of our service to our country and our pride and our loyalty to the country, we did what we had to do. And so to decompress, I would listen to Jamie Foxx, Bernie Mac, Dave Chappelle, George Lopez. Pablo Francisco was another one of my favorites. Jeff Garcia, I used to listen to him. And Jeff Garcia is actually a comedian that grew up in my same neighborhood. So he grew up in La Puente. So later on, I was just like, man, I always thought, man, I'd love to meet these guys one day. And so years after I got out in 2006, about 4 years later, I was kind of going through this existential crisis of, because I felt like there was this time where, and here's something to understand about veterans. They're constantly going through transitional periods, right? Yeah. It's transition out of the military into civilian life. When they get deployed, they transition back into, and it's always like this hopscotch that we're playing.
So you guys are playing hopscotch as veterans, but before we get further into like the veteran world, I want to know what drives a Latino, because I feel like as Latinos going into the military, it's more and more common nowadays versus like, they're going in it because, I want to join the military because that's a very, I guess it's an option. Before, Latinos joining the military was more of an option to get legal status, to, economic opportunities.
Absolutely.
What was your situation in that? How does a Latino end up in the military?
There was two things that drove me to join the military, join the Army specifically. One was I had a neighbor growing up, Mr. Green, and he was the head of security at the school district where I worked at. And one day I saw him walk out of his house. He lived directly across the street. Yeah. And he was dressed in his dress greens. And I just remember seeing him and I was like, wow, like he just looks so sharp. His medals, his pins, and just the way he looked. And I looked at Mr. Green with just this awe of like, wow, and the second thing, which on the more personal level was, I couldn't afford college back then. My socioeconomically, my parents, not to say that we were poor, but we also weren't, even at a middle class status yet. We were, we struggled to get food on the table sometimes, but we always ate. Yeah. My parents worked very hard, and that was something I didn't want to put an extra burden on my dad and my mom. And I said, physically I'm able to do this. So I chose to join the military because I wanted to go to college. Yeah. So that was one of the biggest factors. And being at 17, I couldn't just join the military off the bat because I'm not a legal adult. So my parents I tricked them into it.
I was going to say, how did your parents take it?
So
like what was the initial conversations con tu mamá y tu papá? I'm sure like it was like all in Spanish or something.
Pues lo que pasó was, first it was, I took the ASVAB and I scored a 97. So all the recruiters they were hitting me up all the time. And mind you, I was a junior. I'm like, I still got time. And the only reason I took the ASVAB at first was like, well, they're offering punch and cookies, so I figured this. And I got out of biology class, which I didn't like that dude. So finally, I talked to this recruiter, and he's like, well, we got the split option. You can do this and that. And I said, but, I'm not 18. He says, well, we could sign the waiver, but your parents have to sign it. I said, well, okay, just show up at my house. I'm going to get him to sign it. He's just like, okay. He thought I was just going to have this conversation. I didn't tell him anything. Yeah. So, here comes this sergeant first class with all these medals and whatnot. He comes to my front door, he knocks, and my dad lets him in. My dad's like, hey, there's an Army guy here, and he's like, can I help you? And he's like, yeah, I'm here, talk to Ralph. And my dad says, okay, come on in. So he sit at the table, and my mom, she's looking at me, she's like, oye, ¿qué está pasando? ¿Por qué está un soldado aquí? Oye, Rafi, ¿qué está pasando? And I'm just, no, he wants to he's talking, about college money and stuff. Okay, so finally we get to the paperwork, and I'm signing already.
No.
And then my mom, she looks at my dad. Oye, Rafa, ¿qué estás firmando? And he goes, oh, and my dad speaks very, very good English and Spanish.
Oh, okay.
So it's weird whenever I was with my parents, because whoever I was looking at is how I spoke. Gotcha. So my dad was always like, you speak to me in English. He goes, one big thing that my dad always taught me is like, He's like, you have a brown skin, you have a Spanish surname. He says, but you're an American. Always remember that, mijo. You're always when you're here, you sound like them.
Are you second generation?
So
your dad's.
So I was the first one born here. They both came to this country.
Wow, interesting.
So my dad's from El Salvador, and so he always was, son, you're an American, and so he put that in my mindset of like, sound like you're American. It took me years later to really understand what that meant when I went on a tour with the GIs of comedy, and I went and somebody heard my voice and they looked at me, you're an American. And I was like, I sure am. So he was so happy about that. He knew what that meant joining the military. So my dad signed it right away. He's like, son, you do. I know what you're going to do. He always encouraged me to be independent. My mom, no, yo que voy a firmar nada. Said, no, tú te quedas. Yo no quiero a la guerra. And at the time we had just gone past, this was in 1994. So the Gulf War had already happened, 91 or something.
So you joined in?
So I joined in 94.
Wow.
In 1994. And so, I'm 46 years old, bro. So she was really hesitant, and I looked at her, I said, Ama, I go, yo quiero hacer esto porque yo quiero ir al colegio. Es lo que yo quiero. And she looked at me, she goes, mijo, I'm not going to stop you.
Of course.
Yo no te voy a parar. And she signed it. And it was hard for her. I know as a, especially for the Latinos, our relationship to our parents is so close. Like my parents weren't just my parents; they were my friends, they were my mentors, they were my teachers, they were everything to me. And so it was awesome when I went to basic training. I remember leaving that first day, 4 o'clock in the morning for MEPS, and my mom was just teary-eyed. I'm getting teary-eyed just thinking about it. And I just remember I was like, I'm gonna be okay. I go, you got to trust me. She's like, okay, I trust you. I trust you. So I get on the plane, I take off, do whatever. And I'll never forget, man, the graduation ceremony. And I'm at the front, I'm the platoon guide. And I could see them. And there's just huge smiles. And that right there, for my dad, I knew it was that pride of, he goes, now you're really an American, mijo. You're an American, son. And my mom, she was so proud of me. And so it was hard, but she knew what the goal was, and she never encouraged me to not be who I wanted to be.
In hindsight, because right now you were talking about your dad really focusing on the fact that you were an American, and I'm trying to understand where he's coming from. I don't know if he comes from where he wanted to suppress his Latinidad. Did you feel like your Latinidad was suppressed by saying, you're an American, and not necessarily identifying as a Mexican or Salvadorian?
He always knew, he said, there's always a time and a place for all of that. He says, when you're in a business setting, he says, you need to assimilate. He said, you need to sound like they do and act like they do. He says, but when we're at home, when it's us, we could speak Spanish, we can do todas las tradiciones, especially being, half and half, half Mexican. I got a lot of, my family's from Guadalajara, Jalisco. My mom was super proud of, she was the scariest person to ask where she's from, because, I was like, hey, where are you from? Yo soy de Guadalajara, Jalisco, cabrón. And I'm like, where did you get that gun from, and why are you shooting up at Denny's? You know what I mean? But she was so proud, and my dad being from El Salvador, it's a whole different culture. For the longest time, I didn't even know my dad was from El Salvador.
You thought he was Mexican?
I thought he was Mexican until my uncles and he had a best friend named Chato. And Chato would come over, and then all of a sudden my dad, oye vos, Benny. And he's looking at me, Benny. And I'm like, who the hell is Benny? I thought for the longest time, I thought my name was Ralph Benny Figueroa. And so, the little pictures, they had the little box, I would put Ralph B. Figueroa. And my dad's like, what is B? I go, you always keep saying whenever your homies are here, you call me Benny. He's like, no, I'm telling you to come here, pendejo. But it was such a great, understanding that we have these beautiful cultures that I'm a part of. And I'm very proud as a half Mexican and a half Salvadoreño. And then I joined the military and I became Puerto Rican somehow. I don't know how that happened. Wow. When the first one of the first sergeants I ever met, he had the same last name. And as soon as you meet somebody with the same last name, you're like, hey, somos primos, somos carnales or whatever. And so the guy, he goes, oye, Figue, ¿cómo estamos, papi? And I'm like, what?
Like, that's your first culture shock to another Latin entity?
Because I'm like, he looks like me. He has my same last name. Like, we have all these, but his voice is different. He's, oye, ¿qué parte de Puerto Rico eres? And I'm like, I have no idea what you just said, man. As a 17-year-old, I'm like, what is going on here? And he's like, oye, ¿de dónde tu mami? And I'm like, you're singing now to me too, man? And I'm like, my mom's from Mexico. He's like, oh, that's cool, papi. Tu papá, ¿dónde está tu papá? Where you papa from? And I'm like, oh, he's from El Salvador. Oh, mijo, you one of us, man. Half Mexican, half Salvadoreño. You Puerto Rican, papi. and I was just like, this is awesome. So as I got to join, in the military, I experienced the Puerto Rican culture too. And those were my homies. We'd go salsa dancing. They take me to the club. So, and it was beautiful the way the Latino community, especially in the military, how they take care of each other. You're a brotherhood, even though you come from different cultures and different countries. Once you're Latino American over there, you're all together. You're all together. And then even the black soldiers and the white soldiers and the Asians, every one of us, all the color lines get blurred because you're wearing the same uniform. We have the same objective, the same values. Yeah. So all of those, so equality and equity and inclusivity it's been in the military forever. Yeah. It may not have always been equal
exactly.
to a certain extent, but as when I was there in my experiences and the units that I was a part of, it was a beautiful thing to see. And so it made me proud to not only be a Latino, but also to be a Latino American, as a Chicano, as a Salvadoreño. Yeah. And so I just embraced all of that.
I definitely understand the notion that where your dad said, like, you need to assimilate where you're, depending on every situation. I'm having a hard time kind of also like my Latinidad or my Mexican side is like, no, I bring Mexico wherever I go if it's in a meeting with white people. But I also understand that the times have changed. In 1994, he was coming probably from an era where if you spoke Spanish, you were beaten. If you were looked at differently.
My dad he came to this country in the 70s, and it was even worse back then. So you spoke Spanish and you'd get a ticket.
The Cesar Chavez movement. There you go. So that makes more sense.
So he told me one time, and so my dad used to work at a body shop. He's always been a body man working on cars. And so I remember, I'll never forget his boss, Glenn. And Glenn was this big, tall, white dude who could eat chile like there was, like he ate chile like it was more Mexican than all of us. Like he ate the hot stuff. And so my dad's like, watch, look at this. He's like, hey, Glenn, how are you? And I'm like looking at my dad like, where did that voice come from? And then Glenn comes over, hey, Rafa, how are you, sir? And, how's your life? How's the wife been? And he's like, oh, everybody's fantastic. I go, you said fantastic? You've never said that at home. And he goes, and then as soon as he walks away, he blinks at me. He goes, see, that's what it sounds like. He goes, you see how we connected? He goes, he didn't look at me as a Salvadoreño or as a Latino. He looked at me as an equal at that point. And he put that into my head he says, there's a time and a place. When I get angry, that's where the Mexicano comes out of me and the Salvadoreño comes out of me. But he's like, when you're speaking, especially when you get in academic settings, he says, I know you want to go to college. I know you want to do some big things. He says, you need to sound like you belong here, son. And I've always taken that to heart. But when I'm around my dad, now I can speak Spanish to him. And back then, it was he would only let me speak English to him.
It makes sense, though, now that you mentioned that he came to the States in the 70s. So in 1994, you decided to join the Army. 2001, we know what happened here in this country. How was that? Can you share your experiences of being deployed during 9/11 and how it affected you as a service member and a person?
So that was an event that changed a lot of people's lives.
Yeah.
So after the tragedy of 9/11, and I was in a National Guard unit by that point. So there was this. I remember watching as I was getting ready for work. I was,
Did you know you were going to get deployed?
I didn't. I thought I was, but I just didn't know. It was a matter of when, because my contract was still up until 2006.
Wow.
So I was and I had just re-upped in 2000. So I'm thinking.
Did you regret?
No, not even, not one single bit, because the moment I saw that happen on TV, I ran to my closet and I had my duffel bag full of stuff, and I pulled it out. I called my unit. I was like, do we need a report? And they're like, hey, stand by. And there wasn't just me. There was a bunch of us. All the guys from my National Guard unit, we were ready to go in a moment's notice. So it wasn't until 2003 that we finally get the call. Because when all that happened, it takes time for movement and so that's what. So the first one was Operation. And under that deployment, that's how we got called up, and so it was different, because now going back to the transition, right? Because now I'm working a job, and now I get pulled away from my friends and family, and it was scary because a lot of stuff we couldn't discuss. And I came home after a little over a year, and I was just like, okay, that's it. I need to decompress.
Where were you stationed?
I was stationed originally. I was stationed up north at an Air Force unit. And with that Air Force
So
unit,
in the United States.
I was in the United States at first. So, and then little by little, we started doing some traveling and stuff like that. And then on the second deployment is when I went to Afghanistan, or not to, and from opened up other avenues to travel as well. So basically, as like the way I explain it is as like an air marshal to a certain extent, right? So taking equipment, supplies, and then it was like, oh, there's people there. So it, you know, I got to see both sides of it, you know, the during and then what happens after. And so it was another eye-opening experience. You know, it's a country that I was interested in. You know, I was like, oh, but it's our own version of. And so being there, isolated from friends and family. I mean, making phone calls and staying in touch was expensive. But we had such a great group of guys that we support each other. We encourage each other. That we may do, you know what I mean? And that's why I have this love and affinity for the service members, because of how that brotherhood and sisterhood and how tight we are. And so granted, it wasn't necessarily the greatest experience, but we all came home safely at the end of the day. And that's all that mattered.
How did you face your parents? And obviously you joined the Army at 17. The Gulf War had just happened a couple years prior, but then the 2001 war was about to commence. Like, was that a conversation that with your parents?
I had a talk with them. I sat down and I said, hey, you know, this is what I signed up for. And I said, you know, I want you guys to know. And I just gave them any reassurance to make sure that they understood that I was going to do whatever I could do to bring myself home. And my dad and my mom both trusted me enough to say, hey, you're grown. You've made a lot of decisions. You're independent. And at the end of the day, my mom said, mijo, yo tengo todo en confianza en ti. And she said, yo nomás voy a orar por ti, porque yo sé que tú me vas a regresar. And I was like, that's all I needed to hear from her.
Prayers.
And you know, as spirituality and faith, especially amongst the Latino culture, is strong, you know, and so that was one of those things that made me fight even stronger to make sure that I was always aware of where I was, when I was. And so every time I came home off those 2 deployments, there they were greeting me at the airport, waiting with open arms. And it was hard, you know, because it's like, you know, I missed them so much and I couldn't tell them where I was at. I couldn't because of, you know, the classified information that was happening, and plus for security, right? But as soon as they knew that, I would always send them letters or a little postcard just to say, hey, ama, te amo. That's it. I would just say, I love you. Or to my dad, you know, say hi to Glenn for me, or, you know, and, you know, have some chilies. And my dad hates chilies, by the way. He's Salvadoreño. But so they always knew that I was always there. And I knew that their prayers and their well wishes were always with me. So.
Wow. We have a cousin, me and my brother, who's our producer, videographer, everything for us, who was in the Marines, got deployed, I believe, 2002. He obviously saw firsthand what war was like. Were you ever in any danger?
Always. Always.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
There's things that I'd rather not talk about because of... there's certain memories that they're just better left kind of in the dark now. But there's always a sense of something that could happen. You know, we always were mindful of where we were. And so, that's why, like, a lot of the times when things got tough and, you wouldn't believe, especially like how hard it was to separate yourself from what's going on. And even though people think it's like, oh, it shouldn't be that big of a deal. And it's like, no, you don't understand until you're there, until you see, until you feel, especially if you have any form of empathy for people, you feel this guilt over what other people are going through. And it also, in a weird way, opened my eyes to the world and how, man, we're like in the United States, we're in a bubble. We're kind of surrounded and we're comfortable and we're allowed to speak our opinions. And you go to these other countries and nope, it ain't going to happen. You can't say nothing.
So you talk about, like, you know, to a certain extent, we are free to say whatever we want, do whatever we want, and freedom. There's been a lot of conversations, especially within my friend group, that, like, obviously we see the value that the Army, we see the value that the military brings to the United States. but we also see how much funding is going into it, that we also say like, but we need a lot of that funding here. What would you say to those people that have those conversations? Like, do we really have that much freedom when we have so many people being murdered on a daily basis? You know, when kids don't even feel safe to go to school, it's like, what freedom are we fighting for?
Yeah, I mean, that's always one of those existential questions that people ask themselves of how, you know, trying to justify, you know, because especially in the wake of what happened with George Floyd, right, and you know the defunding of the police, but then who's gonna control the streets and making sure that crime, you know, especially in this day and age here in LA County and San Bernardino County, the crime rate, especially since the pandemic, has increased. You know, just recently, I was just reading an article about in Compton, like yesterday, day before yesterday. Bunch of people, street racers, stormed an AMPM and literally stole all the food, and you know, so it's like where do we draw the line of where, you know, to not go into martial law, right? Because it's literally we're so close to being chaos, and I understand like there's, you know, especially with the NRA about, you know, the whole, you know, weapons, and it's one thing to have a weapon, it's another thing to have you know, a high caliber rifle. And so, you know, there has to be a limit. I mean, and granted, the military is always going to have money because and see, that's the thing. Once again, we're not thinking outside the bubble. We're not thinking about what's happening in Russia. You know, and we have troops in Poland.
I was going to say, because one thing that I just recently found out, because every time we hear in the news, oh, Biden sent $11 million to Ukraine, and everybody on Twitter is like, does Ukraine really need the money? But that's actually for the military men and women that are out there serving, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay, cool. I was like, I got it.
So it doesn't directly go to these countries. And so that's kind of a misconception. A lot of it is a lot of misinformation because maybe a news media reports it that way, and all of a sudden it gets on social media, and you know, you all know how social media works. And there's no way to fact check a lot of stuff. Too. So there's a lot of misinformation going out there. What this money is going towards, and sure, some of it is going for relief aid, for food, because there's people that are starving. There's people that are
literally
displaced,
affected.
And so some of that money is going to go, but you know, it's going to the forces first, to the military, and they're distributing, you know, the supplies and whatnot. So it's not necessarily just for them; it's also to take care of our troops that are out there. And so, you know, I like that you know, as a society here in the United States, we honor our service members. You know, foreign and domestic, because we have troops stationed all over the world. And so people don't really think about that. And if you start to talk to veterans and you start asking them, you know, where have you been stationed? You'll hear, oh, I was in Korea, or I was in Germany, or I was in, you know, some of the Air Force guys got it easy. They get the good ones. You know, the Army, not so much. You know, we get all and the Marines, we get the crappy ones. But, you know, the Navy, they just get to drive around on boats. And so we were just talking about how, like, you know, the Marines have Semper Fi. You know, they all have like these Latin things, and somebody was asking, what's the Navy? And I was just like, I think it's called Ubris Gratis. And they're like, is it really? What does it stand for? I go, thanks for the ride. Thanks for the ride. Everybody's like, oh, you jerk. So now all the Navy guys, I always bust their chops with that one. But, you know, so we're all out there, and, you know, there's Italy, there's, I mean, tons of places.
So you were talking about, there are some things that you'd rather leave in the past and memories, but what advice do you have for other service members who may be struggling with emotional aftermath after their deployment, especially after 9/11? My cousin, for example, came back with PTSD and didn't get any type of help until just recently, because he also like started realizing he has back injury and whatnot, but caused, you know, years later because of his service.
So these are called called service connections, right? And there's different levels. You know, there's physical, there's emotional, and there's mental. And so here at the Veteran Success Center at Cal State San Bernardino, we do such a great job of bringing all those student veterans in and having conversations, opening up. It's not about forcing them to talk about it, but here's the thing: the reality is just like anything else, whether it's homelessness or anything else that's kind of where you have some kind of insecurity, right? Is you have to ask for the help first. And that's where the first step lies. And so when you get the right qualified people to open up the lines of communication, this is why I chose this rehabilitation counseling program, because of the I know the impact that it's going to have on the military community itself, as well as right here directly on our campus. And so, part of it is there's self-stigmatization too, right? A lot of veterans, they're like, oh, it's a sign of weakness if I ask for help, or yeah, there's nothing wrong with me. There's that kind of denial. And so at some point, they're going to have to realize, like, they got to make a choice. It's like, do I ask for help, or do I just keep getting worse? And there's some that start to kind of go through this pattern of just digging their hole deeper and deeper. And then by the time they do ask for help, it becomes a lot harder. So statistically, it's if the ones that ask for help right away are the ones that are overcoming PTSD and other disabilities that come way of the military.
Yeah.
But they ask for the help. That's where the key starts, and that's why there's nothing wrong with asking for help, because we all need help in some way, shape, or form. Not a single one of us. And PTSD isn't just for the military either.
Exactly.
It also people that were like in Las Vegas. Remember when Las Vegas and that whole thing at that country concert? We have a family friend that was there, and she was traumatized by that experience. Very similar to what a veteran might go through. So what she did is she asked for help. And so that's kind of what we try to tell students. We're not. Another thing is I and this is me personally. It's me speaking as the veteran that's gone through these different experiences. I hate support groups. I hate the word support groups, because it automatically puts this negative connotation, thinking that I need help. So if we start changing our verbiage, and we start, just like everything else, right? Society's changed, and we're using all these different letters to represent different things. Well, same thing with when it comes to support groups, right? Support, I don't use that word. I don't like to use those words, I should say, because I don't want to sit in a room in a circle full of people and then we're just talking about stuff in the past. I want to talk about what's happening now and what I'm going to work towards the future.
Gotcha.
And so we're actually implementing a plan here to have what we're going to, I want to call it the Veterans Roundtable.
Oh, I like it.
Right? Because it has
Coin it.
It's to the point. It's a round table, and I want to sit around and say, hey, what's going? I want to point out the positive aspects of how's your experience over at the College of Education, or in the College of Engineering, or working for Coyote Radio or whatever. It's about helping each other grow. I don't want to try to support somebody. I already got my own stuff to support, right? I got my own baggage.
Yeah.
I got my own things that I'm dealing with, and to feel and to kind of go through that it's like that little mouse going through that wheel, right? You're just going to keep going the same thing. Why dig up the past? Hey, it's already happened. Did we learn? If you didn't learn from it, then you find a way to learn from it, but you move on. And so having these roundtables is going to be an opportunity for the student veterans here to further decompress and then share their ideas, because I want them to express themselves in a positive way, to say, hey, you know what I worked on? I'm working on my time management. I stopped using Instagram, and I'm only limiting myself to 30 minutes a day. Good luck with that, guys.
I know, right?
Right? Or even one told me, like, I deleted my TikTok. Oh, I was like, oh my God, you did what? TikTok? No way, man. And so, but to each one of them, that was happiness for them, because they figured, hey, I could do something productive with my life. So we just had a time management workshop here. It was fantastic. We got, and it wasn't just veterans. It was just students from different countries. We had some international students, and it was awesome because we all related on the one commonality is school.
So you have this light about you, this joy and this energy that is just positivity all around. Yep. I'm assuming this is how you've always been in the military or in the army with your friends. Were you that lifeline for a lot of people? Have you ever?
I've been a lifeline. I know continue to be a lifeline. Because somebody needs to take up that mantle. You know what I mean? It's like, I grew up with some great mentors that were that way, and they said, this is just who you are. Own it.
Yeah. And
so I've always gotten compliments like, hey, you're always smiling. As a matter of fact, I got a candygram. Oh. Yeah, I want you to read it. And this is me in a nutshell.
Veteran Success Center of it. I'd like to give a shout out to Ralph Figueroa. They are an awesome student professional because he is willing to help others and has a huge smile every time he stops by. Thank you.
That's me.
Yeah.
They come here and I embrace them with the warm smile. How you doing? That's the conversation. How's it going today? And then sometimes they'll tell me stuff, sometimes they don't. So I leave them to be who they want to be.
How is that though for you when you need to be heard?
You know what? I have a great support system. My wife is she's my rock. You know, I have someone that when I need to vent, it's like I once heard someone say, it was like in a movie or show, it says a therapist who treats themselves has a fool for a patient. So even psychologists and therapists, they need to go and vent, because there's when you reach that level of empathy and you start to absorb a lot of that. And so, you know, my sister, my dad, rest in peace to my mom, even though she's in heaven somewhere, I know that I can still have this conversation with her. But it's my wife, you know, Marisela is she's my encouragement, she's my rock. She's everything for me. And so whenever I'm having that tough day, I know I could sit down with her, we can jump in the jacuzzi, have a glass of wine, and we decompress.
Yeah.
So, and that's everybody needs to have that one person that you can always go back to, a best friend, a family member, a colleague. I mean, it could be anybody, but you need to be able to let things go, because you start bottling it in. And I did that for a long time. I bottled, you know, because I would take in everybody's problems, but then I'm like, what do I got to do? You know, like my vessel's full. How do I unleash? And you know, I used to have, you know, I used to get angry a lot. I used to get annoyed, and now I'm the complete opposite.
Did you decompress in the Army via comedy?
Yes.
I was gonna say, like, did somebody ever come up to you like after your presentation and were like, "Whoa, bro, you were speaking truth of what I was feeling, but you just made me forget about it."
So the beautiful thing about after I got into stand-up comedy in 2010, and it was literally on a whim. It was a friend of a friend of another friend who introduced me to
fulanito, fulanita.
Right. And so the first place I ever did was called Maggie's Pub in Santa Fe Springs. It's some little bar, and it's not a little bar, but they got this back area. And I just went up there, told some stupid stories and jokes. I think I did like 7 minutes the first time I went up, and then afterwards I was like, wow, this is. Like the energy was, it was like, you know, and it's like that when you're on the radio or you're doing like you. Oh, by the way, you did such a great job at the Tamal Awards. Really? you did amazing, bro.
Thank you. I was improvising.
I heard that voice and I was like, oh, this guy does radio for sure. I was like, he's like, gracias a venir, and I was like, oh, dude, you
tell me. I was improvising because I was sure as hell like, okay, what am I gonna do? And they were like, just wing it, you got this. And I was like,
I'm not used to winging it.
Let's go.
Yeah, and then
no, I'm used to winging it, but it's harder now that I have structure.
Yeah.
It's like harder to wing it because you haven't practiced that craft in a while. I'm sure if like, hey, if somebody comes up to you and says like, hey, tell me a joke, you're like, whoa.
Yeah, whoa, it's not the right time.
Yeah, it's like,
hey, we're in the men's restroom right now. You know, it's you know, and the thing about stand-up though, it's like it gave me that flexibility to learn how to really wing it. And I kind of did this whole off the cuff type of deal. Once again, going back to some of the influences with Jeff Garcia, was one of the best comedians at doing crowd work that I've ever seen. You know, the other one that I really loved listening to, and he was the host, was, so you've heard of Gabriel Fluffy Iglesias, right?
I love him.
So Martin.
O sea, es mi compa.
So yeah,
I'm just kidding. No le voy a marcar.
Gabriel's another amazing human being.
Oh my gosh, I saw him here at Cal State San Bernardino. My mom fell in love with. Oh my God, I love chocolate.
Yeah,
like that little just
And you know, or his Siri voice, or the, you know, he's so talented. But Martin was one of my favorite comics to listen to because of how the way he would interact with the crowd, and he just like embraced them. And I always thought to myself like, hey, I want to be that guy. I want to be that style. And so when I started doing stand up, it was you know, as I produce my own shows. So instead of just going asking guys like, hey, can I be on your show? I'm like, hey, I'd rather do my own show, and I'll ask you to be on my show. And so I wound up just, you know, starting off at the Ice House in Pasadena, which if you ever go visit, you'll find my picture up on the Wall of Fame.
That's awesome.
And, you know, that was one of the biggest honors to, you know, for Bob Fisher, the owner. He just sold it to the Buss family who owns the Lakers.
Oh, perdón.
So Bob Fisher was the one who presented me with my Wall of Fame pick. And so a lot of my style came from, you know, just being able to interact with crowds. And the biggest thing and one of the things I was so proud of is always giving out the tickets to first responders and the military. And you know, and when I say first responders, I'm talking about EMTs, I'm talking about firefighters, I'm talking about police. You know, all our policemen, you know, I know they get a lot of heat for what's going on, but they're not all like that. You know, you can't, one apple can't spoil the bunch. And once again, the guys that would come, they were having such a great time. And at the end of each show, when it came to the military, I would ask each one of them to stand up, and I would let them know, it's like, hey, these people, I gave them tickets through vettix.org. I said, every single one of these guys have served their country. I want you to give them a round of applause. And at the end of the show, they would all come up to me like, "Hey, man, can I take a picture with you?" And so I became the selfie master. Yeah. I'm so good at selfies right now, dude. That's something I learned from Joe Coy, by the way. That guy's a selfie king. This guy, pop, pop, pop. So they would come out, and so we'd have these little conversations, and it wasn't necessarily like we had to thank each other for our service, which we do appreciate. When people do say, hey, thank you for your service, Memorial Day is not one of those. That's when you do on Veterans Day.
Exactly.
Memorial Day, it's a whole different thing. That's where you give thanks for everybody that gave up, that paid the ultimate price. It's remembering. But when a veteran gets thanked for their service, I'm grateful for that somebody from our nation, from our country, acknowledges, that, hey, we've gone through stuff, and they may not know me, or they may not know the next veteran. But if you take that one quick second just to thank a veteran, you don't understand how big that goes in the scheme of things in their day. And so these veterans would come out to me at the end of the show and would be so grateful. Like, and one of the biggest things is like, hey man, you don't have no idea all the stuff I was going on through. I said, but for an hour and a half, I don't remember any of that.
That's awesome.
You took me away from I didn't make my house payment, or my kid started acting up in school, or my car broke down. All that stuff went out the window, and they said, hey, I was me for an hour and a half, and I just want to maintain that. That was, to me, the best compliment they could give me.
Yeah, no. Well, thank you for bringing laughter and joy, just because we need definitely more of that. I feel like the arts is something that we're hanging on by a thread and we're losing, and it's so beneficial just for a lot of things. But you pursued a non-traditional student way. You started Cal Poly Pomona in 2019. You had already served. You married already. And
well, actually, let's go back. I started in Cal Poly Pomona in 1997.
Oh,
so 1997 through 2000, somewhere around there. I was in the National Guard at that point, and I was going to become a teacher, but I took a break. And I was like, I was getting burned out from school, and you graduate from Cal State San Bernardino. You know how tough it is, and at that age, I had a lot going on, so I just wanted to take a quick break, and then.
So you did your first 2 years.
So I did my first 2 years, and then that's when 9/11 happened. So that changed my trajectory of my whole life, and I thought for a while I was like, I'm not going to go back to school. I was managing a very successful body shop back in those days, and I never thought I was going to need an education, but once the pandemic hit and it showed us, we need to have something to fall back on. And I immediately, decided, hey, I'm going to go back and finish my degree. I was like, it was something I knew my mom always wanted me to do. I knew it was something that I want to show to my dad as the American that he wanted me to be. and the whole reason why I joined the military. So during the height of the pandemic in August of 2020, I went to school, and I was loading up. I 15 units per semester. So I did 4 semesters, all 4 of them, and I'm proud. I got straight A's. Wound up graduating with honors last May, and so.
How was that though? Like attending college during the pandemic as a non-traditional student?
It was okay. At first, I think I would have had a harder time had I been in person. Because I always, I'm in my early 40s at that point. I'm like 43 at that point. And I'm thinking, I don't want to be the old guy in school. I don't want to be, you know what I mean? Because you are the non-traditional. And for the most part, most student veterans are non-traditional anyways. They're always going to be in their mid-20s. And so, a lot of them have mortgages and kids and other responsibilities. And at first I was like, oh man, how am I going to feel like, and the other thing I was doubting myself was like, academically, can I write at that level? And then I heard some of these kids talk, and I'm like, oh, you guys are, you guys made me feel really good right now.
They were like doing TikTok dances.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, you know what? Yeah, you keep doing that. And so I just kind of dug into my classes and owning my own company even before all that, understanding how technology works. So Zoom was easy.
Yeah.
It took a few weeks, but one thing is like, you just. Military people are so adaptable to anything.
I was going to say.
And that's one of the skill sets that we carry into and make us great students, because we learn how to adapt very quickly. So I adapted, and I was able to go through those last 2 academic years, 15 units each, so I can graduate on time. And all of them straight A's.
How was that transition, were there any resources that utilized you to help you navigate the process of transitioning from military or army to schooling back in 2019?
So going back to the first time I went to college, there were no veteran centers. There were no veteran resource centers. Cal Poly Pomona has an excellent veteran resource center.
Now, not then.
Now, back then, this actually just started in 2012, I believe. So Elke is the director, and Sam Kim, he's the certifying official, and he's an Army vet. So he and I hit it right off, and so I wound up applying for a job there, and I wound up becoming the veteran resource advisor. As the older veteran, they kind of looked at me as like, hey, you know a lot of these resources. You know about Chapter 33, 31, 35, 36, 1606. See, I'm rattling off these numbers, and I'm like,
what do these mean? What do these
the normal
mean?
people, yeah, they're like, are those lottery numbers? I wish. No, those are the different programs that the VA has, and I just so happen to get very assimilated to and acclimated to all of it, right? To understand what each benefit was, and so I got there and thank God they have that veteran resource centers, because we had a safe place for us to hang out and play games. These guys, Battleship at the Veteran Resource Center was insane. It was, dude, they had brackets, and I'm like, whoa, you guys are taking this to your ship. It's like, yeah, and I'm like, okay, bro, it's just the little one. It's only the two. It's only the two one. It's like, relax, bro. But it was so much fun. We did a lot of activities there, and then coming here to Cal State San Bernardino. The Veteran Success Center is absolutely amazing. And I'm not saying because I'm biased because I come here.
And we're here.
That's where we're recording. We're right here. Look at this. Huh? No, there's just something about Augustine, our director right now. He's a Navy veteran. He's an alumni from Cal State San Bernardino. Jaime Espinosa, our certifying official. He's another product. He's homegrown. He's grew up here. Got his master's degree here, and I started realizing this is such a great community.
It is,
and the space is like we're in the quiet room right now. I know we're making a lot of noise, but there's hammocks, and there's right now we're in these beanbag chairs.
I know, I saw them, and I was like, "This is perfect. We're recording here."
There's been times where a student will come up to me like, "Hey, Ralph, can you do me a favor? Can you wake me up in an hour?" I'm like, "Yeah, dude."
I'll set a timer.
I'm like, hey Siri, set a timer for 1 hour. I'm like, okay, Ralph. And I'm like, all right. And these guys, they knock out, and I come up and, hey, dude, time for class. And they appreciate it. Sometimes that's all they need. And so this became I call it the bunker, because we're underneath the old Coyote bookstore. But we have a computer classroom over here, which we do some great workshops. We have a little kitchenette area, lounge, where there's some video games. We do meetings. So the student veteran organization meets in there. We have 2 campuses that are part of Cal State San Bernardino. There's here, San Bernardino, obviously, and then we also have the Palm Desert campus. And so we have students that are a part of both. And so when they can't make it here for our meetings, guess what? We're going to stream it through Zoom.
Yeah.
So, and we have all our student interns, and it's just a great little space for us to come. And as a matter of fact, before you got here, or while you were setting up, I was actually helping a veteran to access her benefits, and she walked away so happy. She's like, "Oh my God, I wish I would have been here sooner." I'm like, "Hey, the point is you made it."
Exactly.
And she goes, "Oh, I'm gonna always come back here. Hey, mi casa, su casa."
I remember when the Veteran Success Center started a couple years ago. I was still a student here, and at the time, the director Marcy, we were very involved with her. Because every time like there was events, because we have one of our fraternity brothers who joined the Marines later on in life, but he was always involved, and we always try to help. So that's why it's very special to me to see how much it's grown, to see where it's taken so many veterans, and the amount of veterans that have probably came through here seeking services, seeking camaraderie, seeking to be heard and listened, because society was not ready to reintegrate them.
Yeah.
Because I think that is one thing that a lot of people, don't really understand. The PTSD, every sudden noise, every sudden movement, always probably feeling something behind them.
4th of July, it's a tough holiday for veterans.
God, yeah, fireworks.
Right? They hear the fireworks.
Even though it's something very American.
And they know exactly what it is, but those are become
triggers.
They're triggers, right? And so it's good that we have these facilities and how they're designed to welcome, especially the student veterans. And it's and like I said, this center isn't just for the veterans. It's also for we have tons of spouses, we have tons of dependents, because even though they didn't serve, guess who stayed home and took care of all the bills and all that. So us as service members, we appreciate our family because they kept things going. And so and there was a lot of disconnect. I know a couple of my buddies, they became estranged to their kids because they felt, the kids, I felt abandoned. It wasn't that they were trying to abandon them. It's just like that's what happens when deployments go on. And so, this is our way of saying, hey, let's be inclusive of everybody. And then we also have a lot of students that have no affiliation, like no family members, but their best friend is in the Marines or their best friend is in the Air Force. And they said, hey, I just want to learn about their culture. So that way, when they come home to visit, I have something to talk to them about. Like, hey, I know what Uber's gratis is, So shout out to all the Navy for that one.
Yeah.
So
what advice do you have for other veterans who are considering pursuing higher education during these uncertain times? And probably they think like you, what am I going to do with a bunch of high schoolers? Basically, I'm already old, but they want to pursue higher education.
Do it. They just do it. You have to keep yourself in that mindset of this is for you, this is for your family. Don't worry about whatever everybody else. And that's kind of where I learned that right off the bat, is just like, I can't worry about what other people think, because if we live our life trying to please everybody, we're never gonna be happy, right? So I just kind of like, hey, am I happy? Is my family happy? Is my family taken care of? Am I still supporting? And that's all that matters. And for all these veterans that have these self-doubts, don't. We've overcome so much through training, through like physically, man, my knees are jacked up. Like if I were to evaluate myself and give myself a Carfax, I'm all jacked up, bro. I got a salvage title. My shock absorbers aren't working. The muffler's always backfiring. Yeah. But no matter what, I still decided to say, hey, this is something for my own benefit, because put yourselves, and I tell veterans, put yourselves in that mindset of you're gonna create change. Yeah. Don't. I was one of the ones that used to bitch and moan about the VA system. The healthcare. You know what that's like, bro? That's like throwing a little rock at a brick wall. What are you gonna do? You're gonna maybe put some little chips, but nothing. And I said, you know what? I don't want to be about it or just say something about it. I want to be about it, and I want to make that change. So instead of saying, hey, I want to do it from the outside, I'm gonna do it from the inside.
Eso mero.
You know what I'm saying? So, hey, para eso me metí al army, you know what I'm saying? To get my education so I can make that change. And sometimes we just have to take our own self-initiative, just like with the Student Veteran Organization. It disappeared from 2018 to up until when I rechartered it back in last semester.
Wow.
It was for 4 years, it was been gone, but somebody had to do it. And I was like, and you should have seen I was talking with Jaime one day. I was like, hey, what is all this SVO? He's like, oh, that's the Student Veteran Organization. And I was like, why do we have so many shirts? And this is like, well, he kind of gave me the short story. And I was like, what do we need to charter it? He's like, we need 5 members. And I was like, I'll be right back. I walked out of the room. I went to our little, we call it the command center, where the student assistants are. And I was like, all right, we're going to start a club, guys. All right, I need a president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, and 2 members. Who's in? And there was 4 of us in there total. And they're like, I'll do it. And I ran out to the room, into the lounge area, and I said, anybody else want to join the Student Veteran Organization Club? And I'm like, I was so excited. Yeah. And then there was this other student. He's like, I'll do it.
So that excitement, I swear that attracts people.
Yeah. And I walked back into Jaime's office, and I'm like, all right, I got 5. Now what? He's just like, I didn't think you were going to do it right now. I was like, I don't got time to. I'm in my 40s, bro. I got to do things right now. Porque I don't know how much more life I got left. I want to make the rest of this count.
Exactly. I'm the exact same way. It's sort of like, si voy a hacer algo, lo voy a hacer ya. Porque mañana it's already too late for me.
Yeah.
I'm already moved on.
Yep. I know. I'm already thinking about some other project that I'm probably going to forget about too.
Exactly. What message would you like to share with the next generation of Americans about the sacrifices and bravery of our service members and the importance of honoring and remembering their legacy? Because I feel like that is a value or something that we have lost, and even my generation has lost.
Yeah. Show appreciation for those that came before us, the ones that laid the groundwork for. That's how our country was founded in the first place, right? And so the first all of the legislation that passed for Americans with Disability Act. Where did it all start with? If you rewind history and you go back to where it all started with our military veterans. Yeah. And so show some gratitude for these people that made a sacrifice, and then come Memorial Day, those that paid the ultimate sacrifice. Especially when Pearl Harbor, and if anybody's ever been to Hawaii and you see what happened there and how the tragedy of that event happened, and it was just a bunch of sailors that were it was a regular December day, and next they're still there at the bottom of this this water, and Memorial Day is such a poignant moment for us to remember and memorialize all these. Go to a cemetery and just show some respect. Even though you're not military, just go out there and give a salute, or just say, quietly say thank you for your service, for the ultimate price that you paid, because this is the foundation of our nation. Right? Without the Air Force, without the Navy, the Coast Guard, which every time I see a Coast Guard, I make a wish because they're very rare. I go, aren't you guys supposed to be at a pool or something? The Marines, the Army, all of these branches, now Space Force, where every single one of these individuals have sacrificed, and I can't even tell you how many times I've missed birthdays and holidays. Even as a stand-up comedian, when there was a military tour, and I was so blessed to be able to join the GIs of comedy, which were all veterans, and all of us were doing stand-up. I've gone to so many countries, but I remember in particular the time we went to, and it was during Thanksgiving, and I told my family, like, hey, I would rather be here with you guys, but this is where I was for many, many years. I was by myself, and I want to be able to pay it forward. And honestly, one of the best turkeys I've ever had was.
Oh wow!
Second to my mom. My mom's turkey was still, and I'm not biased because that's my mom, but holy cow, and that was the closest second. And then we went to for Christmas, and we saw those troops, and they were cold, and for one, I was just like, I don't know how often I'm gonna get to see. But to be there, and I'll never forget those moments of. I remember the first show we did. So we were doing 2 shows, and it was this huge hall, right? And this big old stage, and right before us there was the little community was doing xylophones, which they were awesome. They were playing like Bruno Mars and stuff like that, but on xylophones. so we go up there, we do our tour, we do our comedy routine, and then everybody leaves, and we're waiting for the second group to show up. So I'm in the adjacent room right before it, and I'm kind of in the back, and I'm just decompressing from the first show. I'm like getting myself into the new one. And I'm looking at my notes, and I'm like, oh, I like this show. Okay, this one. And then all of a sudden, a bunch of the soldiers start walking in. They're like, hey, are you the Mexican guy? And I was just like, wow, that is really racist. But I go, considering that the other guy is, one guy's white and the other guy's like, he's uber white because he's actually from Ireland and stuff. So I'm like, yeah, that makes me the Mexican. And they're like, dude, can we take a picture? And I'm like, what are you guys talking about? They're like, man, everybody's at the bar next door telling your jokes, dude. And I was just like, and for me, I was so flattered. They're like, yeah, so are you from California? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, hey, man, this is him. Everybody's like, hey, this is the guy. And so here I am with a group of 30 soldiers out in taking pictures before, and they hadn't even heard my set yet. But in the bar, they did. They said, "Oh, wait till he does the Bernie Mac voice," and so.
Oh wait, now I want to hear the Bernie Mac voice.
The Bernie Mac story. It's back to my drill sergeant where I tricked him into. I sold candy bars underneath his nose the whole time.
Oh, very Latino of you.
Hey, I'm a businessman, bro. So, but everybody kind of, and it's kind of like one of those things where I appreciate so much of those soldiers and the Marines and everybody that we encountered, all over the world, that because they're separated, they're away from their family. They're not like, hey, come down and we're gonna have a picnic today. They sacrifice so much. So just be grateful for all these people that have, and everybody does it for different reasons, right? Some do it for financial reasons. Some do it to get out of jail. Some do it because this is their only means to make income because they don't have a full education yet. But there's so many benefits to joining the military. So think about it. That's also something that you want to put into your head and I'm great. I did it because it was the best investment I ever made for myself, for real.
So this podcast, Échale Podcast, obviously the word in Spanish, échale ganas. But in English, it translates to putting in something. What do you want to put into this world? What is your paw print?
My energy. I want positive energy, positive positive enlightenment to just be you, be grateful for who you are, be grateful for the people around you, be positive. You know, there's nothing worse to me than somebody that's negative, right?
Yeah.
You know, when you get that negativity, it drains you and it drains people around you. You know, be positive about anything, and anything you do it 120%. None of this 100%. None of this a ver qué pasa, right?
Sí.
A lot of my friends, no, pues, and they even use the acronym, the AQP. I'm like, no.
I didn't even know that existed.
So somebody got me out of that because I used to say that a lot. Well, we'll see what happens. And and finally somebody said, don't do that. Tell them this is what it's going to be. And the moment you believe that, and this is what they told me, they said, you know how people say, oh, I put it out into the universe. Right? Lo puso en el universo, a ver qué pasa, right?
Manifest it.
Yeah, I professed it. Well, this is how the universe works, people. The universe doesn't believe you until you believe it first. Mm-hmm. And when somebody told me that, they said this a ver qué pasa, this we'll see what happens mentality, that's not, the universe isn't going to believe you, but the moment you have that positive energy to say, you know what, and I started, instead of I'm thinking about becoming a counselor, it became I'm gonna be a counselor. And the moment I changed my verbiage, the world opened up to me.
Amen.
So this is what it's about, positivity, because this is what's gonna get you. And you know what? Sometimes the hardest part is letting go of the negative people, right? So everybody's like, I know, but it's my best friend, or it could be a family member or whatever. But sometimes you need to do that because we all brunt a weight of our own stuff, right? Our own baggage, our own mentality, our own, stigmatisms about whatever, right? Yeah. But the moment, and here's we always talk about math too. Everybody talks about math in universe, right? We add, but we also subtract too, right? Subtract the negative, stick with the positive. And the moment you guys change your positive attitude, I guarantee you, the world is going to, and the universe is going to start opening these doors, and you become the key to your own success.
Amen to that. Ralph, it's been a pleasure having you here on Échale Podcast. I would like you to share with everyone, where can people find you if they want to get in contact with you?
So if you want to find me, I'm on like Instagram and Twitter and Facebook at Comic Ralph 20. I'm even on Farmers Only, bro. I mean,
I don't even know what that is.
Hey, you never know. Hey,
Farmers Only. I was like, is that like?
No, it's no. I'm just kidding. Everywhere I've done social media, it's always Comic Ralph 21, and so reach out. I do interact with a lot of my fans, especially the ones from stand up and I'm sorry that I haven't done it in such a long time, but I kind of been busy getting myself, educated.
In a master's.
So I'm in a master's now, guys. Yeah. So, but I'm doing events here on campus. As a matter of fact, I'm hosting I'm going to follow in your footsteps.
Oh, awesome.
I'm going to host the veteran graduation ceremony where we're going to be doing these.
Oh.
So, I still do events. I still MC and host, and but eventually, once the dust settles, I'm gonna go back to the improvs and back to the Ice House in Pasadena and go out there, support the Latino comedians too, man. They got some great stories. Yeah. and it's not about them being Latino comedians. They're just comedians that happen to be Latinos. There's a big difference. But go support and so yeah, man.
Well, thank you so much, Ralph. I cannot wait to see you perform. Gracias. Check them out at the Veteran Success Center here at Cal State San Bernardino. Ya sabes. No se te olvide suscribirte, like, share, download, share it. Just share it. Okay, bye.
Whoa. The video isn't done yet. You still haven't subscribed. Make sure to hit that thumbs up button and subscribe. And don't forget to follow us on social media at Échale Podcast.